What's up, everybody? It's time to do another history of horror. And because of what happened on Friday, this one's going to be dedicated to Tony Todd. Let's go. Now, unfortunately, we all heard the news on Friday evening that Tony Todd passed away. He had a remarkable career in the horror landscape. And I want to kind of go through a few things that he did. Some things you may have known, some things you might not have known. But let's get started. So Tony Todd was born December 4th, 1954. So not much I couldn't find much information on his upbringing, his childhood. But he attended the University of Connecticut. He also started theater at the Eugene O'Neill National Actors Institute before he started his career. His first acting credit was a movie called Sleepwalk. I've never seen it, and I don't know much about it, but that was his first movie. He also starred in Platoon. So my first personal introduction to Tony Todd was in Lean on Me. I believe it was 1989 or 1988 when he played Joe Clark, played by Morgan Freeman. He played his head of security in that movie, which he didn't have a huge role, but he was a very pivotal role in that movie. And then 1990, is when horror really, he got his first foray into horror, and it wasn't even in a small role. He was the main character, one of the main characters in the Night of the Living Dead remake. So how amazing is that, to be early on in your career and you're slated to be a main character in one of the, if not the single greatest zombie film ever made, and a movie that really kickstarted a whole subgenre in horror movies. That's huge. But it wasn't until 1992 that he completely left his own mark, personal mark on the horror landscape, when he became Candyman in the 1992 horror Candyman. One thing that bothers me a little bit about that movie is a lot of people say they give credit to Scream for being the renaissance of slasher films, and I get why they say it, because after that movie came out, there was a bunch of other like movies that kind of had a mini resurgence of the slasher genre. But at the same time, it feels like insane that you're glossing over Candyman, because if you think about it, not everybody, a lot of people that talk about horror talk about the slashers of the 80s and the 70s, and then it jumps to the Scream and movies after that, and says that Scream was like the big movie of the 90s. 1992 was huge. The popular horror magazine Fangoria started their awards shows in 1992, which I believe the first year was won by Anthony Hopkins from Silence of the Lambs. Well, 1993, Tony Todd was a nominee for Best Actor in a horror film. He was beat out by Gary Oldman from Bram Stoker's Dracula, which isn't a bad person to lose to, because that movie was just astonishing. But Candyman, for me, is one of the, arguably, some will say it is the greatest horror movie ever made. My brother, his personal favorite horror movie ever is Candyman. And I understand completely. I don't see that it has anything wrong with it that wouldn't make it there. And for someone like myself, for a black man to see what Tony Todd can do, and to be because he's the first one to really get a main focused character. Before then, the man that was in the original Nightmare on Elm Street, or Night of the Living Dead, and then you had the blaxploitation movies with William Marshall playing Blackula and stuff like that. But from a mainstream perspective, we hadn't really seen a black character in horror cinema at that point. And not only in the movie, but that, like I just said, that movie could stand alongside any other slasher movie that I could think of. So it's just awesome to see that kind of representation on screen. And that wasn't the only thing he did. Tony Todd it wasn't just horror, but he was amazing in all facets of cinema. He voiced Darkseid in a Lego superhero movie, as well as one of the Darkseid, I believe it was Darkseid Apocalypse, one of the more recent animated films. He was a voice of Darkseid in those. He was in a few different versions of Star Trek. Just a very well-rounded actor. He was also in The Crow. He was in X-Files. He was in Xena Warrior Princess. He did all kinds of things. But what I love about Tony Todd is that he always came back to horror. And he also tried to pay it forward to have his name and his presence upscale some of the newer horror characters on the landscape. Being in the very first Wishmaster to help the Jinn rise to prominence, that franchise. Being in the Hatchet franchise with Victor Crowley. He was clearly a fan of the genre and wanted to see the genre continue. Even with his quick cameo in the newer Candyman movie. He also was the voice of the Fallen in Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. He's just done so much. And I'll be remiss in missing this. Even though Final Destination was more about death, he wasn't like the main character villain in that movie. He made that movie. His presence commanded that film and definitely gave weight to the overarching villain, which was death in that movie. Just an absolute phenomenal actor. Yeah, but just, I mean, that's pretty much all I have for that. But just for me, I just want to stress, I mean, what Tony Todd did with Candyman and did for the horror genre, I feel like we allowed him, we let him go and venture off into other genres, but he always came back home. He always came back to horror where he belongs. And the landscape would not be what it is today if it wasn't for him. So rest in peace, Tony Todd. This is my video, guys. Thanks for joining me. See you guys next time.